Hello, and thank you for watching our presentation, Collaborative Course Design using Gagné-inspired blueprints. Before we dive into the content, we just want to introduce ourselves. I'm Nikki Bosca, and I'm the Associate Director of Online Teaching and Course Development in the Office of Online Programs, and I also serve as the Associate Director of the Institute for Teaching Excellence at the New Jersey Institute of Technology.
And I'm Cassie Sardo. I'm an instructional designer in the Office of Online Programs at the New Jersey Institute of Technology. So during this session, we'll be talking about how to create a more collaborative course design experience using a blueprint model based on Gagné's 9 events of instruction. So first, we're going to share our session objectives and some background about our institution and online courses. Then we're going to introduce Gagné's 9 events of instruction and explain how they've influenced our blueprint approach and model. And finally, we'll turn to an example of a completed blueprint module and how it translates to a course in Canvas. So we have 3 main session goals for our session. The first is that you'll be able to identify Gagné's 9 events of instruction if you aren't familiar with them already, so that you'll have an understanding of each event and how they are used in designing effective instruction. We also want you to be able to use the design process as a professional development opportunity, providing faculty with a learning experience while developing a course. And we hope that you'll be able to apply backward design principles to a course development blueprint, whether you're using blueprints already or considering this approach.
So let's just start off with a little background. Our course design team and process has evolved a lot over the years to meet the needs of our institution. NJIT is an R1 public polytechnic university, and so much of our faculty are highly focused on research. We currently have over 42 fully online programs and certificates, all of which are for graduate students with the exception of one new program, which is a bachelor degree completion program in management. Out of the 42 plus programs and certificates, there is a predominant STEM focus, though there are programs for other subjects as well. And to better coordinate and lead these programs across colleges, the Office of Online Programs was formed with the aspiration of creating an NJIT global campus. NJIT was an early adopter of online learning. While we have been offering online programs since 2013, there have been online course offerings in various forms since the 1980s. The courses that we have now for our online programs were developed with an OPM rather than internal instructional design services, and there was a lack of uniformity between programs or colleges, and the experience between the NJIT instructors who served as the subject matter experts and the instructional designers was mostly transactional. There's also been a university-wide culture of courses being content-driven instead of outcome-driven, in part due to the pressure instructors feel to get through a large volume of material over the course of a semester. And this has had a large impact on the way online courses were originally built for online programs. After the university ended the contract with the OPM, there was a need to update and improve online course offerings and also better prepare instructors to deliver them, because at that time there was no required training or instructors didn't have to have any demonstrated ability prior to teaching online. Whoever typically taught the face-to-face version of the course on campus was expected to put their materials in the learning management system and teach online. So the result of these needs was an improvement plan based on 3 criteria. Um, Establishing instructional design services in-house to work directly with the NJIT instructors who would be the subject matter experts for courses. An ID team that is Quality Matters certified and used that training to create an NJIT quality assurance rubric that creates uniform standards to meet the needs of our students. And finally, using the formal course development process as a professional development experience to prepare and educate faculty while designing student-centered and outcome-based courses. However, in order to do this, we have to encourage a cognitive shift in the way our instructors who act as our SMEs think about teaching and course planning. So how do we get instructors to think pedagogically instead of topically?
So as Nikki mentioned, we often find ourselves working with instructors who really feel compelled to first concentrate their efforts on content. So organizing topics, identifying readings, recording lecture videos, and they tend to follow the order of chapters in their assigned text as well. So as we were rethinking our design process and materials, we wanted to incorporate a theoretical framework that would be more learner-centered and help our faculty re-envision their approach to thinking through units of instruction. So to reiterate this question, how can we as instructional designers get instructors to think pedagogically instead of topically? And this is what led us to Gagné's 9 events of instruction. Robert Gagné was an educational psychologist who introduced the 9 events of instruction in his 1965 Conditions of Learning. And his theory emphasizes both different types or levels of learning, as well as these instructional events and corresponding cognitive processes. So while Gagné, of course, wasn't considering e-learning in the 1960s, his events do translate well to this context. So what are these 9 events? The first one is to gain attention. So thinking about how in each module you will get and keep students' attention. Students want to know why a unit of instruction is relevant. They may wonder, what am I going to get out of this? So we ask our instructors, in order to sort of satisfy this event, to create module overviews that explain to students the general topic of a module, how they're going to learn the subject, specific skills they'll take away, and the deliverables they'll ultimately produce. Next, we inform learners of the objectives. So how we do this may seem straightforward, such as providing learners with a list of outcomes relevant to the module, but why we do this is also important, because providing students with specific learning outcomes helps guide students' focus and how they can expect to be assessed. The third event is to stimulate recall of prior knowledge and learning. So how will we remind students of the applicable knowledge that they've learned in the past or their previous related experiences? We know that students aren't coming to the table to courses as blank slates, and so tapping into students' existing knowledge, which they may have from other courses or professional experiences with something like a quiz or discussion questions, helps students leverage what they already know or identify any gaps in their knowledge or skills. The fourth event is to present the stimulus in the shape of content or a learning activity. So the question here is, how will you teach the information, or what type of learning activity or environment will you create to foster learning? So again, the question here isn't necessarily what content to present, but how to present it. Video lectures are a straightforward option, but there could be opportunities for video quizzes, guest speakers, or self-paced tutorials as well. And then the fifth event is to provide guidance to the learners. So how will you provide guidance like scaffolding or support? Students may not always be able to immediately apply what they've learned from the instructional content. They may need practice opportunities, demonstrations, or models like examples of previous students' work before they're ready to translate that stimulus or demonstrate achievement of the learning outcomes. And then sixth, we want to elicit performance from the learners. So we can think of eliciting performance as assigning formative or low stakes assessments that give students a chance to learn by doing and progressively develop their skills. So can a larger project, for example, be broken down into smaller tasks? Seventh, we want to provide feedback to the learners. So what will you do to let learners know how they're doing? How will you correct, affirm, or encourage them? Without an instructor's perspective or input, students have little to no way of knowing where they stand, whether they've successfully achieved the learning outcomes. And it's important to provide students with substantive feedback on their work. Peer reviews can also be a good opportunity for students to receive feedback, as well as learn how to identify opportunities to improve their own work. And then eighth, we assess the performance of the learners. So how will you know that students have learned the material or can do the desired tasks? This event entails the module summative assessment, where students will apply the knowledge and skills they've gained or practice and demonstrate their achievement of the learning outcomes. While this might look like an exam, our office really encourages authentic assessment so that students are prepared to transfer what they've learned beyond the course in real-world contexts. And this can also create more opportunities for student collaboration and milestones throughout the semester. And then finally, ninth, we want to enhance the retention and transfer of new skills, knowledge, and/or attitudes. And so in our course development projects, we try and achieve this by encouraging instructors to develop reflection activities for students to consider their greatest takeaways or points of confusion from a module. And this can also be followed up with additional resources for support or recommendations of future knowledge. And so Gagné's 9 events outline the order students will experience them in, but this isn't necessarily the best order to design them in. So our strategy is to employ backward planning to start with the desired learning outcomes and first ask what we want students to be able to do by the end of a course or module. So reconfiguring Gagné's 9 events helps us design for optimal student engagement and student-centered learning by being outcome and assessment-oriented instead of being content-oriented. So rather than starting with what we want students to know, we ask instructors to start with what they want students to be able to do with what they know. So first, we help instructors determine outcomes relevant to a module. And then the next step in our module design process is really where we flip Gagné's 9 events by thinking about how to assess the performance of the learners instead of thinking about first presenting the stimulus or instructional materials. So determining what students should be able to do by the end of a module helps instructors be better prepared to make decisions about what materials will support students in that endeavor. So having an assessment in mind sets the table for instructors to develop instructional materials that give students what they need to be successful. And by waiting to tackle the first learning event of gaining attention, like a module overview, until the very end of the module's development, instructors are better equipped to explain what students can expect to take away. So before having our instructors approach development this way, we often found that if writing a module introduction was the first task they completed, they often had to go back and revise it because of unexpected changes to their instructional materials and assessments. And so as you can also see in this rearrangement of the events, the 7th event, providing feedback to the learners, has disappeared from this list. And while it's something we and the instructors stay conscious of and discuss during development, it isn't necessarily part of our course build because it's an event that occurs during course delivery. So now we're going to talk about the blueprint we developed and how Gagné's 9 events influenced it.
So for every course development project, a blueprint document is created to guide the instructor through the deliverables on a module by module basis. This is a cloud-based document, and in our case, we do this via Google Docs so that it can be shared as needed and all contributions are always up to date. Because the blueprint organizes the instructor's action items based on a backwards design of Gagné's events, as Cassie just explained, it asks the instructors to think through the outcomes first and then plan out the assessments. The instructor links to drafts of the action items such as completed outcomes, assignment prompts, descriptions, instructions, discussion questions, etc., right in the document for the instructional designer to review and provide feedback on. In this way, the blueprint serves as a common space for collaboration and sharing of deliverables, questions, and feedback. Once the deliverables have been revised as needed, the instructional designer is able to take the course content from the blueprint and build it out in the learning management system, which for our institution is Canvas. Because we use a Google Doc for this, other stakeholders for the project, such as department chairs or coordinators, also have access to the document, and they can be tagged in comments to get their input, or they can add comments of their own. This helps the department maintain accountability for the project that they requested. So here's a brief overview and preview of what our blueprint document looks like just as a blank template. Cassie is going to review a completed blueprint shortly, but as you can see, the Gagné prompts that frame the ask for the deliverables are on the left-hand side, followed by a checklist for the action items. And then on the right-hand side, there's space for the instructor to actually share what it is that they've created as the deliverables. One of the most important parts about our design process is that it serves as a professional development opportunity for instructors through the close collaboration with the instructional designer. That's really the key. Because we guide instructors through the process instead of simply organizing their materials in the learning management system, we're able to use backwards design to encourage pedagogical thinking. For many instructors, the course development process is actually their first exposure to the concept of measurable outcomes in Bloom's taxonomy. And because the instructional designer interprets all the material through the lens of the student perspective during the build, the process provides a model for how to build materials and structure a course that is student-centered. And the result is that instructors are able to adapt what they learn with us as best practices and apply them to their other courses in other modes on their own, which many of them are excited to do.
So now we want to give you a little bit of insight into what a finished blueprint module can look like. So I'm just going to turn to Google Docs so that we can take a closer look at that. So here we have an example of a finished module in our blueprint template, and this is for a technology and humans values course that we're currently developing with an instructor. So as you can see in the rightmost column, the instructor has filled in all of the development materials for each corresponding learning event, starting with informing learners of the objectives and working mostly backward from there. This module is dedicated to bibliographic research. So the instructor knew the learning outcomes that she wants students to achieve in this module, to identify a social issue raised by technology, to be able to write and to inform and persuade various audiences, to locate and evaluate current research. And so this led her to develop a research forum assessment that's going to ask students to visit a previous discussion in the course and choose a technology that they or a classmate explained in this particular context of Langdon Winner and political and social relations. So she's really scaffolded toward this assessment. She's engaging students' prior knowledge, and this allows them to focus on the research and annotated bibliography since topics have already been identified. So she designed her assessment first, and this gave her a better idea of what stimulus or instructional materials to present to her students in this module. Her first lecture is actually an overview of the research forum, what it's going to entail, the expectations, and something like this would have been difficult to record before designing the assessment. She also walks students through the database they'll be using for this assessment and throughout the course, and she supplies videos from our institution's library and others. And she also knows that based on the assessment she's designed, part of students' reading for the week is going to involve them choosing a popular and scholarly source of their choosing. So she's been able to account for that in the list of required reading. She's also provided scaffolding resources that model annotated bibliographies, and she's pointed students to our institution's writing center as an additional resource as well. And then the last item that she developed was her module overview, in which she explains the general topic of the module, specific knowledge students will learn, and what they're going to be doing in that module, how they're going to be applying what they've learned in the research forum. And she also has students thinking ahead to the next module, which is going to entail group work. So in my role as the instructional designer, I've been keeping track of the action items that have been completed, writing in the status update area. So often we use this space for recommendations for revision to the module. In this case, I've happened mainly to know what the instructor and I spoke about during our one-on-one meeting, looking ahead to the upcoming module. And you'll also see at the bottom of the blueprint, we keep a student roadmap for the module. So this helps us and the instructor keep the student experienced order of events in mind as we plan, even though we're mostly designing these backwards. So now we're going to take a look at how this translates to our learning management system. So thinking about how we take what is in the blueprint and translate that over to Canvas. So right now I'm in Canvas from a student perspective, and this is an example of the template that we use for all of our office's course development projects. So instructors used to develop material directly in the learning management system without using any kind of blueprint to draft or prototype. And so then we as instructional designers would refer to Canvas to review materials, offer feedback, and revise as needed from there. So having instructors now work in our blueprint not only really helps them focus more on pedagogy and less on technology, but we have a little bit more control over the appearance in Canvas for programmatic consistency and accessibility. So the first item we have here is the module overview, which we just saw in the blueprint example, and this corresponds with Gagné's first event of gaining students' attention. Next, we inform the students of the objectives by listing the applicable outcomes for the module. And so this way, students are primed to know what they can expect to be assessed on. And then here in the learning pathway, we first present the stimulus and organize the instructional materials like readings and lectures. And this instructor has gone the extra mile to let students know about how long they can expect to spend on reading and watching these materials. And the guidance is presented to the learners in this section dedicated to review. We have here the bibliographic resources, and then this culminates in the module's assessment, the research forum. So while this is not the order that the instructor developed these materials in, this is the order that students experience them in according to Gagné's 9 events. So we can turn to the lecture video page where the majority of the stimulus is presented to students. So here we have the videos the instructor has recorded where she reviews the assessment for students in advance and walks them through the database they'll be using. So by giving students insight into the upcoming assessment in this way, students are also going to have a better idea of what to take away from the external videos to follow. And then we have the module's research forum. And here this points back to the previous discussion in the course that I mentioned that students are going to be building on. So students are going to be writing full APA citations for the sources they select, and they'll also respond to a peer evaluating one of their sources. And the instructor also recommends students revisit examples in the module lecture if they need help getting started. So blueprinting the assessment and materials first and using a backward design process informed by Gagné's events sets the instructor, students, but even us as instructional designers up for success. Because by the time things are created in Canvas, feedback on them has been exchanged. We know what the module is going to include. So it's much easier to do things like link back to other areas of the course. And the module, creating a more seamless and straightforward experience for students.
At this time, we want to thank everyone for watching our presentation. If you have any questions for us, please feel free to reach out. Cassie and I have shared our contact information on the screen. Thank you.